won't believe what recently shattered the world of hip-hop and love. Rumors of a DNA bombshell have emerged, and Karlie Redd is at the heart of the issue. Has been discovered his apparent paternity claim is now being questioned, leaving followers in surprise. Karlie reportedly waved evidence in Rasheeda's face and insisted that the truth be exposed before the next season's shooting started. Emotions were running high. Emotions intensified when Rasheeda, who had always spoken up for her family's reputation, said she would not be quiet. Her husband's reputation was shattered in public. Imagine an angry but sad Karlie confronting Kirk in a passionate confrontation that left everyone in wonder. The family was divided, with several backing Kirk's impassioned denials and others backing Karlie's daring claims. One question remains. As producers scramble to record every emotional moment for future episodes, is this another dramatic twist or the largest treachery in the climax? Rasheeda thundered. If you lied about your own blood, what else are you concealing from me and us? Her voice trembled between wrath and incredulity, and onlookers are kept on the edge of their seats as alliances break down. Cameras look behind closed doors. Things will never be the same when this DNA drama bursts. So buckle your seatbelt. As Kirk Frost's quivering fingers lingered over the DNA report papers, fluttering like a frenzied pulse, the room went quiet in awe. With her arms clasped and her eyes ablaze with vindication, Karlie Redd stood her position. As Rasheeda watched the scenario unfold in front of her, her heart hammering against her ribs, and her pulse thundering in her ears, cameras were warned to capture every instant of the silence that hung between them. Of a happy ending they had made together, now seemed like an unstable house of cards, with every secret threatening to destroy it. Is this Karlie's soft but accusing voice? Penetrated the atmosphere. Is this what you've been hiding? She pointed to the lab seal with her finger as she held out the first page. The weight of the proof knocked Kirk out of his usual bravado, leaving his face empty of color. His lips parted in protest as he swallowed, but the words never came. Instead, he glanced at the news as if he was wishing it away with a wailing voice. Rita walked forward with glittering eyes. Kirk's jaw clenched as she replied, Kirk, tell me it's not real. Tell me that you told the truth about our child. Perspiration trickled down his forehead. His eyes filled with guilt and embarrassment as he shook his head, and his voice was hardly more than a croak as he said, I believed I was protecting us. Karlie laughed bitterly and softly. Are you keeping us safe? She said, taking a step nearer. What do you mean by deception protection? Her laser-like glance at Kirk highlighted all of his flaws. The workers behind her glanced at each other in astonishment as viewers at home assaulted the live chat with incredulous remarks. Social media alerts burst. Fans are horrified. One comment read, the family was left split. Another added, you falsify the results before presenting them to Rasheeda. Karlie raised her voice. You switched the labels and adjusted the numbers. Are you aware of what that implies? Desperation flashed in Kirk's eyes. He tried to what it meant, but his voice stuttered. With tears on the edge, Rita attempted to preserve her calm as her breast heaved. She took a brief peek at the sealed envelope that held Kirk's first test that Karlie had already created the proof for. Was now evident to everyone. Rita's younger sister stepped there with a phone in hand when there was a quick tap on the door. With a trembling voice she proclaimed, Rita remained close by, jittery as if divided between desiring the truth and fearing about its ramifications. The thunder of her pulse was mirrored by the calm hum of the production lights as her heart raced. She loved Kirk with all of her heart, but the notion that he had cheated on her hurt more than any betrayal she could have imagined. Kirk said, his voice wavering like a ship in rough waters. What's the purpose of exposing this tonight? His question hung in the air, heavy with sorrow, and Karlie's answer was a measured breath followed by a perfectly placed arrow. Her voice was hushed, unyielding as she indicated, because I waited until every stone was unturned. I verified the authenticity of the lab, verified each signature, and followed chain of ownership. You've gone far enough with your falsehoods. Rita walked forward, her eyesight obscured by a veil of tears. Kirk, she whispered with a cracking voice, discuss anything so sacred, please. As he reached for the envelope, Kirk's hand trembled. Touching the paper like a man nearing a crevice, he halted and momentarily closed his eyes, perhaps preparing himself for the coming blow. He exhaled resignedly and lifted the cover and took out the first sheet, his eyes flying over the lab seal, declaring legitimacy in the hush that followed. The sound of paper rustling was overbearing. Kirk's eyes widened. As he scanned the written facts, his knuckles became white. Rita held her breath, anxiety constricting every muscle in her body. Finally, Kirk's shoulders sagged as the reality destroyed his years of assurance. It's true, he murmured in a hoarse voice. I'm not the father, I promise. The gathered bystanders gave out a collective scream. Some raised their fingers to their lips in wordless horror, while others grabbed their phones even more firmly, their thumbs lingering over the record buttons. Cameras Weird captured the steely determination in Karlie's attitude, the sheen of tears at Rita's eyes, and the twitch of Kirk's lip. Social media was overwhelmed with shocked replies from followers who were watching at home. Fans are astonished the family was split, and I can't believe Kirk would do this. They wrote fast. Karlie took the chance. She drew out a flash drive from her bag. She walked over to a laptop that was waiting, put it in, and then clicked once to display the contents onto a giant screen, lines of text scrolling across. Kirk and an unnamed accomplice exchanged carefully designed phony texts, one of which said to replace the genuine with the doctored report while no one was watching. Ensure that Rita never sees the unmodified effects. There was no place for doubt. Because of the frigid, calculating tone of the chats, which stung like a kick to the stomach, Rita's knees, she dropped into the sofa, her lips covered by a hand that muffled her cries as he tried to converse. Kirk's voice, which had previously been so powerful on reality TV, shattered. He faltered, "I thought I was protecting you. I never intended for you to suffer harm." His admission seemed thin in front of the pile of facts. Rita's sister stepped from the throng, clutching the envelope closely and astonished with a voice quivering from the gravity of her admission. She stated, "There's more," she supplied, her own evidence, including recordings of private conversations, in which Kirk expressed his worry that the truth may alienate Rasheeda, and text messages from his ex-lover. Kirk's own voice stated, "I am frightened she will leave me if she finds out the truth." As the tape played over the speakers, every pause, while the debris settled, the room seemed to be trapped in time, as if the air itself was immovable in a wordless confession in Kirk's consciousness. Lowering as tears poured down his cheeks, Rita peered at him with a combination of wrath and anguish in her eyes. "How could you make up anything about our child?" she sobbed. "How could you build your whole life on lies?" Karlie approached Rita and put out a helping hand. "You are deserving of the truth," she said gently. For a little, the instant the two women made an alliance forged in the fire of treaty. Rasheeda seized the hand. The unity in their clasped hands was recorded by the cameras, generating a powerful picture that would come to in the most explosive moment of the season. Another bombshell dropped just when it looked that all the secrets had come to light. Rita received a sealed package from a private investigator. Alongside a production assistant, Rita stayed close by, uneasy as if caught between desiring the truth and concerned about its consequences. The thunder of her pulse was mirrored by the gentle buzz of the production lights rushed through her heart. She loved Kirk with all of her heart, but the prospect that he had cheated on her was more devastating than any betrayal she could have imagined. Kirk said, his voice wavering like a ship in rough waters, "What's the purpose of exposing this? Tonight?" His question hung in the air, heavy with sorrow. A planned breath followed by a carefully directed arrow was Karlie's reaction. Her voice was calm but resolute as she added, "Because I waited until every stone was unturned, I validated the validity of the lab, validated each signature, and traced the line of custody." "You've gone too far with your falsehoods." Rita went forward, her eyesight obscured by a veil of tears. "Kirk," she murmured with a broken voice, "tell me it's not true. Don't lie to me about something so holy, please." Kirk's hand trembled as he reached for the envelope, skimming the paper. Like a man approaching a precipice, he stopped and briefly closed his eyes, perhaps preparing himself for the imminent blow. He sighed resignedly, then raised the cover and drew out top page. His eyes darted over the lab seal, declaring legitimacy in the hush that followed. The sound of paper rustling was deafening. Kirk's eyes widened in disbelief as he scanned his hands became white, and Rita held her breath, panic gripping every muscle in her body. Finally, Kirk's shoulders collapsed as the truth sank. The assurance he had held for years, "It's real," he muttered in a hoarse voice. "I'm not the father, I promise. Father, I promise." Onlookers pulled out a collective scream. Some raised their fingers to their lips in wordless terror, while others grabbed their phones even more firmly, their thumbs lingering over the record buttons they wore, catching the steely determination in Karlie's attitude, the sheen of tears at Rita's eyes, and the twitch of Kirk's lip. Social media was overwhelmed with astonished replies from followers who were watching at home. Fans are stunned and I can't believe Kirk would do this, they wrote fast. Karlie seized the moment and took out a flash drive from her handbag. She moved over to a laptop that was waiting, plugged it in, and then clicked. Once the contents were shown onto a large screen, lines of letters scrolled over, perfectly crafted. Phony communications between Kirk and an unnamed accomplice. One, he told to replace the original with the doctored report when no one is watching to ensure that Rita never sees the unmodified results. There was no room for question because of the frigid, calculated tone of the chats. Rita sank onto the sofa, her mouth covered by he used his hand to muffle her screaming as he tried to speak. Kirk's voice, which previously been so dominant on reality TV, broke. He tripped. "And I believed I was protecting you. I never meant for you to experience harm," he admitted. Flimsy in line of the mountain of evidence given, Sister came from the throng, gripping the envelope firmly amid the stunned silence, her voice shaking with the intensity of her admission. She stated, "There is more." She presented her own proof, which included recordings of private discussions, and Kirk admitted his worry that the truth could alienate Rasheeda and received text messages from his ex-lover. Own voice said, "I'm scared she'll leave me if she finds out the truth." As the tape played through the speakers, while the debris cleared, the chamber seemed to be Kirk's confession seemed stuck in time, as if the air itself was immovable. With his head dropped and tears streaming down his cheeks, Rita looked at him with a mixture of her eyes were filled with fury and anguish. "How could you make anything up about our child?" she sobbed. "How could you build your whole life on lies?" Karlie approached Rasheeda and extended a helping hand. "You are worthy of the truth," she said gently. For a short moment, the two ladies made a bond forged in the furnace of treaty. As Rasheeda grabbed the hand, the cameras recorded the oneness of their joined hands, generating a powerful picture that would come to during the most flammable moment of the season. Another bombshell emerged. Just when it seems that all the secrets, Rita received a sealed packet from a private investigator. Rita, a production assistant, opened it with shaky fingers to see a file including lab receipts, invoices, and bogus signatories. Every move Kirk had done to arrange the swindle was thoroughly documented. The receipts validated falsified data. The invoices connected payments to a questionable lab. The signatures matched Kirk's unmistakable handwriting. There was no ignoring the proof. The repercussions of his actions pressed down on him like an unstoppable weight. Kirk dropped to the ground, head in hands. Family, members, and friends exchanged astonished and sorrowful faces, with some stepping closer to comfort Rita, while others remained in addition to recognizing that this was television gold. The production crew. Rita got up from the sofa and took a minute to let the raw emotion play out in front of their cameras. Despite her mild demeanor, her voice held the echo of steel when she continued, I loved you with all my heart. However, love based on deceit isn't love at all." Despite her tears, her eyes as she glanced at Kirk, remorse and shame were mirrored in his eyes. Tears streamed from his eyelids, creating a physical barrier. Karlie saw from a distance how tight the atmosphere was, and her delight was balanced compassion. She had followed the truth, but she hadn't anticipated the human damage that would follow. Rita's mother stood out, her voice shaking with pain and wrath, reprimanding Kirk. "You promised. You'd always be honest. But you used deception even though you vowed to protect my daughter this time." Kirk made no effort to explain himself. Instead, he just nodded and closed. His face was buried in shame, and the cameras followed every face until the conflict ended. Filming each member was caught in the personal aftermath of a betrayal that would have an influence on the next season. Implications of public exposure. Yet the moment persisted in the tense silence long after producers indicated for a cut. Later, home watchers would revisit the scene, scrutinizing each gaze and tremor, and debating Kirk's objectives and Rasheeda's future with the prospect of repair. Dangled on the thinnest of threads in that tense living room where alliances had shifted and trust had been lost, Rasheeda stood between loss and perseverance. Karlie carried the mantle of truth-bearer, her mission completed, yet Kirk remained sprawled on the floor, undone by his one question remained when the lights went out and the cameras moved on to the next scene. Could a love betrayed thus profoundly ever be repaired? The narrative that began with a simple envelope blossomed into a tornado of desire, leaving the whole home in a state of following the announcement, her arms around herself as if striving to unite the shards. Despite her broken world, Rita went to the comfy chair by the window, while Kirk remained on the floor with his hands held firmly over the open bundle on the floors, and his head bowed. Karlie hovered nearby, her expression turning from one of triumph to one of concern as she studied the two. The cameras continued to film every tremble on Rita's shoulders, every shiver. Kirk's position and the profound quiet of the room, interrupted only by the low hum of mechanical family members and friends, exchanged uneasy glances, wondering whether to approach or give way ever. Rita's loyal friend unwillingly stepped up and offered a trembling tissue. She leaned down to Rita and said, "You deserve better." Rita accepted it. Even the brightest days may end in darkness as the light fades. Outside sank low, slanting through the draperies and casting long shadows on the floor. Karlie aroused attention by softly clearing her throat. "I realize you're in agony," she murmured. Quiet voice. "But you both need to address this." Rita's crimson-rimmed eyes met, Karlie glanced up, and her voice sounded hoarse. Questioned with moist and beseeching eyes, Kirk lifted his head, his voice scratchy with he mumbled with despair. "Please help me set this right." His tone as urgency penetrated Rasheeda's pain, causing a spark of conflict inside her wounded heart. The cameras momentarily after the emotional maelstrom and the startling hush. The production team signaled for a brief break. It was unexpected when a producer approached, provided water, and politely inquired about the team. Could go for a little. Kirk straightened up unsteadily and nodded numbly. Rita remained, sat and trying to calm her breathing with shaky palms on the tissue. Karlie stayed by her side. Kirk chatted with his longtime confidant, who having stayed at his side for years. He acknowledged in the hallway with a voice barely above a whisper, I didn't anticipate it would go this far, and I was confident in my ability to handle and control the consequences." One hand was put on his shoulder. She murmured gently to his friend, "You underestimated the power of truth, must now cope with the consequences." Kirk gulped deeply and nodded. Becoming Rita rose up, ready to return to the site of his pact, with a combination of anguish and thrill in her chest. Back in the living area, she brushed away her tears and decided to address Kirk directly. At that time, the cameras began up again, recording her first motions in his way. Karlie moved to make space while keeping a careful eye on the activity. Hip-hop and love aficionados who were watching live held their breath, sensing the narrow line between reunion and the ultimate breakup. Rita was standing over Kirk, who was still seated on the floor with his head down. Her voice was forceful, despite with shakes. She said, "You owe me the explanation of a lifetime." Kirk peered. He looked back at her with sadness in his eyes. "I'm very sorry," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I was terrified." "Rita," I halted him by lifting my hand. "What are you afraid of?" She pushed Kirk. He took a deep breath and collected his resolve. "If I'm not all you deserve, I'm afraid you'll leave me." Raw and vulnerable. The discovery stayed in the air for a short second. Rita's face softened. However, the wound was still raw. "You believe I might be protected by a lie?" she mumbled. And Kirk shivered with sobs running down his cheeks. "I figured it would," he said. "But now that I think about it, it truly destroyed us." Rita's tears returned, this time filled with great regret rather than wrath. She acknowledged, I'm not sure I can trust you again." The guests carefully absorbed each bitter remark as the tension echoed across the room. Karlie moved up to Rita's side and placed light hand on her back. "You deserve honesty regardless of what you decide," she responded quietly. Rita nodded, uncertain whether she could forgive, but she knew she needed to clear her thoughts before proceeding. Kirk proceeded to kneel in the hopes of some little degree of redemption. His hands clenched as if in prayer. Receiving's cousin quickly entered the room while holding her phone. She gasped, "I discovered something more." Kirk wrote an email to his lab contact. To arrange payment, she revealed an email trail containing invoices, time periods, and amounts. The deception was exacerbated by Kirk went to his knees, horrified by the degree of his own lie and the letter's chilly businesslike tone, hit his face with his hands with each sentence like a knife. Rita read the email chain. Out loud payment was made. Findings should be modified to ensure there are no discrepancies. When she ended, her voice cracked. Turning away, crying hysterically, her voice sounded flat as she continued. It was all planned. Unable to look her in the eyes, Kirk nodded the living room, like a courtroom with a lady he still loved but no longer recognized, pronouncing the judgment. The camera zoomed, close-ups of Karlie's steadfast watchfulness and Rita's troubled profile. With Kirk's tears, the audience realized the significance of what was occurring at that time. To people whose lives had been interwoven in trust and affection are now in risk of irreparably falling apart. The audience was left wondering whether love could survive such a grave betrayal when the producer discreetly implied that the program will end on this cliffhanger. Rita gave Kirk one more look as the lights went out and as the team prepared to slit her eyes. Fatigued but resolute, she said, It's time to heal and see whether we have a future together." As she turned and left, Kirk's Karlie followed her, lead as her shoulders quiver with silent weeping. Kirk was left, the door quietly closed, leaving him alone in the center of the room, surrounded by the debris of his choices. Behind them in a story of deception, heartbreak, and the constant question of whether truth can ever entirely set people. The screen went too dark, setting the scene for the next spectacle. Kirk was left alone on the floor with the package with the humorous DNA results, and his quivering fingers among the hush that followed Rasheeda's departure. Every second of his wordless pain was recorded on video, the hollow echo of his own incredulity, the glitter of tears on his cheekbones, and the way his shoulders heaved with each arduous breath. The wooden floor was covered in twilight shadows outside the window, as if the sun had Carling and her sister quickly fled the wreckage, were standing on each side of her as she made her way back to the middle of the room, their features sharpened. Kirk was determined, with bloodshot eyes and an almost audible voice. I glanced up and said, I see why you hate me. Rita's gaze softened just enough to startle him, and she stayed near but did not turn away when she perched on the couch's arm. Hate isn't the problem, she said quietly. Trary, I need to know why you thought lying was better than being honest. Karlie got a tablet out of her bag and started reading the texts she discovered. She offered it to Rita, who studied Kirk's statements in a small digital type. Don't let the facts destroy our tale. We'll fix it before she finds out, and believe me, you owe it to us. Rita's voice quivered in anguish as she read each phrase aloud. You organized this, she murmured. Kirk bowed his head, his words stained with tears. Each deception was planned. Recoiling in discomfort, he said harshly, I made a mistake while defending you. Rita stood up and strolled slowly. As the room appeared, chilly family members and friends went to the perimeter, uncertain whether to respect her personal space or step in. Kirk tried to keep up with her, ultimately standing up unsteadily. His voice trembled as he replied, Please allow me to clarify. Rita paused and looked around. Go on, she said in a monotonous manner. Kirk inhaled, mustering. I met someone who was bold enough to share the truth he had kept hidden for so long. Before I met you years ago, he said softly, we took a DNA test, but the conclusions were not conclusive. I was afraid and felt like a liar if I couldn't show my capacity to be father, was my primary focus. Rita examined his face for honesty. As the words hang Kirk took a gulp, and I convinced myself that the moment had come to resurrect that old exam when we learnt regarding our kid. I imagined that if I could just display it, we would be comfortable and pleased as if our future were his. Revelation resonated throughout the quiet room, interrupted only by hum. Rita's breathing got laborious as a result of the ventilation system. So she, instead of replying to me, she wrapped her arms around herself again and mumbled, You took away our power to decide. Kirk closed his eyes as her words weighed heavy on his chest. He said, I was afraid you would leave me, afraid that you would depart without providing proof. Rita slowly shook her head and wept. She said, Love isn't proven by papers. Trust is the foundation of it. Karlie went forward, speaking gently. Everyone makes mistakes, she said. However, certain faults establish boundaries that cannot be eliminated. She gave Kirk a short glance. You betrayed the lady you promised. To remain safe, Kirk nodded while taking shallow breaths. I understood what he said. I'm ready to take on anything comes my way. Rita was quiet for a while, stared at Kirk as if weighing every ounce of devotion she had ever had, as if holding her breath. The room became still. She eventually let out a breath and eased herself to the edge of the sofa.